Welcome back to the Future of Real Estate presented by the Ellis team at RE/MAX. Don't forget our website, which is topagent.com. Our phone number, you can always reach us, is 239-489-4042. With us today is special guest, the Honorable Lee County Property Appraiser, Ken Wilkinson.
Appreciate it.
Ken, Governor Christ is he's looking at tax reform and whatnot. What is the latest going on out of Tallahassee? I know you're pretty plugged into that because you were on that commission last year. I know the governor really values your opinion. What do you hear?
There are some other initiatives. The governor actually cannot propose a constitutional amendment, nor can they veto it. But of course, he has the bully pulpit and can support it. And there were some initiatives that did get put on the ballot that we'll be voting on November 2010 or 2010. One of which I don't know if it was all that well thought out, and it's caused me some, little concern. And I'm all for caps. I love them. There's one that we did put on that put a 10% cap on non-safe homes property. I'm okay with that. One of those would reduce that to 5%. I can live with that. The one I think they haven't totally thought out is part of that one, and that would be a first-time. It sounds good. They always do. First-time homeowner, if they haven't owned a home in Florida within 8 years, they would get a 50%. I think it may have been watered down to 25, but up to $100,000 first-time exemption the first year. Now you have your normal $50,000, which was increased last time. But I'm thinking about that, and I know you're big fans of MLS, so I went into one of my analysts. I says, what's listed out there for under $100,000? At the time, it was about a year ago, we had 110,000 properties in Lee County, single-family residents listed for under $100,000. I said, okay. So if this passed, certainly the motive was then, and I haven't read it entirely now, if they got a 50% first-time reduction, then you add the other 50 that's already there, the tax collector's going to have to send them a check. The problem I really had with it, other than that, of course that would be zero taxes. I don't know if that's, everybody should pay something, you would think. Then, the way this reads is the property appraisers in Florida, who would have nothing to do with making that law, every year would have to increase their taxes 20% until it got back to what it would have been, but compounded with, we will have by then double-digit inflation back. So are we putting people in the same position that got us in the problem in the first place, was not being able to afford the home? If they look at it and say, well, I don't have to pay any taxes, that's the difference where I can afford it. But then the first year they get a 20% increase. Now it's up to 40, 60, 80.
But it's just going back to where it should have been in the first place.
Yes, but,
so lenders should pre-approve
as well, the values will be going up.
True, but
so the rate would be applied to not only a 20%
but there's a cap of
increase,
3% per year.
Yes.
So the 20% is just going up the 20% it should have been the whole time anyway.
That's some theory. I don't think the analysis has been made thorough enough to say that yet.
Okay.
But I'm looking at it.
Do you want to explain for our listeners the concept of recapture? Because I don't think people really get that.
It's a personal thing with me because I did author the Save Our Homes, some 15 years ago. And I can tell you when we wrote that, right here in Lee County, with the board we put together, etc., got the signatures, got it on the ballot, got passed, in place, passed in '92. The way it works in Florida, it has to be voted on by the voters to change the Constitution. There's 3 ways to get there. Citizens, which would save our homes. The legislature can do it, which was portability is a good example, which we actually wrote here in Lee County as well. Or the TBRC, which I've served on, which is only every 20 years. So I've actually gone through all 3 processes. The recapture, however it's done, to get to the ballot, and then it has to be voted on now 60%. Then, this is what a lot of people don't realize, the next session, the legislature has to write implementing language. Then the State Department that oversees that part of the statutes. In Florida, ad valorem taxes is back to Department of Revenue. Well, they write rules implementing the implementing language that the legislature wrote after the citizens changed the Constitution. With Save Our Homes, they wrote, and I can tell you it was not in it because I was the original author, it never came up as a recapture. So now in Florida, this year, last year was the first year it happened, the property appraisers in Florida, if your market value, and we know what's happened with them, they're all going down. And if your you are homesteaded and you have value that you're not being taxed because it's been capped at 3%, the property appraisers must go recapture and tax some of that value up to 3%, even though the market's going down.
Even though you may not want to, and it was never the intent, because
Correct.
you were the author of that, so you
I
know what
it
the
wasn't
intent was.
the intent, and that's what the most frustrating thing for me was. Maybe in my career, certainly ranks up there, is an unelected official telling me what was my intent, and therefore the citizens who changed the Constitution.
How do you
That's
reconcile that, though? Because they come up with implementing language, and then they
we
Department of
challenged
Revenue
it.
does the rules.
Right.
What happens if the rules don't coincide with what the statute says?
Well, in my belief, they didn't, but they had the authority to do that. We challenged it. We, being those who were supporting safer homes, took it to the governing cabinet, had a special hearing. Well, it's the governing cabinet, that was back then Governor Childs, who appoints the executive director of the Department of Revenue. So they upheld their employees, so to speak. So we were out of the box. We even took it to an administrative judge. We lost there because it was their authority to interpret our intent.
Can you go back and do it now that you have a new governor?
We would have to put, I thought we could, but I was told no. I had meetings the year before last when this first started coming up with the governor's staff and attorneys and everything, but we were told it had to be another constitutional amendment. This year, the impact won't be as great because the way it was written is it's 3% or the CPI, consumer price index, whichever is less. CPI for this year is 0.1%. So, but I think 57 homesteads this year, 57,000. Well, I will have to go recapture
0.1%.
Yeah.
Even though
the year
the taxes went
before
down.
it was like 55,000, but that was a full 3%.
But like we talked in the last segment, their values may have gone down 30%, but if
Yeah.
they were homesteaded and had recaptured built in, they may
Yeah.
have to go back and increase 0.1%.
Yeah, that's it's
That's
tough
a
for us
shock.
to explain. Sure it is, because you're reading the paper. I mean, you're not going to read about this, and then you're going to get a trim notice from us that tells you that your taxable went up 0.1%, but yet your market went down 100. Now, if your market's coming down 100, here's your cap. If they meet, then they go down together, which means the cap gets eliminated, which is really, that was the intent. That was not a problem. But the fact that even though the market's still a little higher than the cap, I got to go increase it for the taxable.
That's why I like doing the show. You can see why people are confused, because you've got recapture, you got to go back and recapture taxes. You got taxes in arrears. So when people get their 2009 tax bill and they pay it in November of 09, it's really for the value of January of 09, which is based really on
The prior 12 months.
the prior 12 months, 08. So everything's like whacked out in arrears, but then you pay it now, and it's like, how come if
Nope.
I'm paying it now, why aren't I, this is the way people think, why
Sure.
aren't, on today's value, doesn't that darn tax appraiser know that my value went down?
That's why I hope that they
40,000.
will pay attention to the trim notice in the supplement we put in there, because I think it does explain, and I hope they'll take the time to do that. It's not an easy job, as we know, but I do love it.
Well, you've been listening to The Future of Real Estate presented by the Ellis team at RE/MAX. When we come back, we'll have more with Lee County property appraiser Ken Wilkinson, so stay tuned.